Welcome back to the Crypto Intellect, everyone. I hope you're having an amazing day. XRP holders, we might only have a few hours left before we get major developments that could send shockwaves through the crypto market. Right now, the situation is incredibly tense, and there are several moving pieces that investors are watching closely. We have geopolitical uncertainty, critical economic data on the horizon, and major crypto-related developments all happening at the same time. This combination has created one of the most important moments we've seen in recent months. Before we dive into everything, I want to thank all of you for being here. Your support, your comments, and your engagement mean the world. If you're excited about XRP and the future of crypto, make sure you show some love to the channel. Today we're going to break down exactly what's happening, why investors are nervous, what could happen next, and why the next few hours and days may end up being extremely important for XRP holders around the world. The biggest concern right now is the ongoing uncertainty surrounding negotiations between the United States and Iran. Financial markets hate uncertainty, and whenever there is a major geopolitical issue hanging over investors' heads, risk assets tend to become extremely sensitive. That includes cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, and many other digital assets are all waiting for clarity before making their next major move. Markets are trying to determine whether a deal can be reached or whether tensions will continue to escalate. Every new headline seems to push sentiment in one direction and then immediately reverse it. Investors are finding themselves caught between optimism and caution. That's why we're seeing hesitation across multiple markets. This isn't just about politics. This is about capital flows, investor confidence, and the overall willingness of traders to take risk. When uncertainty rises, many participants choose to sit on the sidelines and wait for confirmation before making major decisions. That waiting game is exactly what we're seeing unfold right now. When we look specifically at XRP, the token has been showing resilience despite the broader uncertainty. However, the market clearly lacks conviction at the moment. Buyers are interested, but they want more information. Sellers are active, but they don't seem fully committed either. This creates a situation where price action can become choppy and unpredictable. Many traders are watching key support and resistance levels while waiting for a catalyst that could provide direction. XRP has often found itself at the center of major discussions about regulation, adoption, and institutional involvement, which means it tends to attract attention whenever significant market events occur. The current environment is no exception. Investors are trying to determine whether this is simply another period of consolidation before a larger move higher, or whether more downside volatility could still be ahead. That uncertainty is creating tension across the market, and every new headline seems to carry more weight than usual. One of the reasons investors are paying such close attention to the negotiations is because the two sides appear to remain far apart on several major issues. Reports suggest there are still disagreements regarding key conditions that would need to be resolved before any final agreement could be announced. Whenever markets see two sides standing firmly on opposing positions, confidence in a quick resolution begins to fade. That's what many investors are grappling with today. As time passes without a breakthrough, traders start reassessing the probability of success. Expectations begin to shift, and market reactions become more sensitive to even minor updates. The challenge is that nobody outside the negotiating rooms truly knows how close or how far apart the parties actually are. That information gap creates speculation, and speculation creates volatility. For XRP holders, this means that developments completely unrelated to crypto can still have a meaningful impact on market sentiment in the short term. What makes this even more interesting is the timing. We are entering a week packed with economic data that could influence Federal Reserve expectations. Investors will be watching manufacturing numbers, labor market reports, jobless claims, and employment statistics. These reports matter because they help shape expectations for future interest rate decisions. The crypto market has historically performed better in environments where monetary policy becomes more accommodative. Lower interest rates tend to encourage risk-taking, increase liquidity, and improve conditions for speculative assets. That doesn't mean rate cuts automatically send crypto soaring, but historically they have often provided favorable conditions. Therefore, every economic report released this week will be analyzed through the lens of what it might mean for future Fed policy. That's a big reason why traders are approaching the market carefully, rather than making aggressive bets before the data arrives. The labor market remains one of the most important pieces of this puzzle. Strong employment data can be positive for the economy, but it can also complicate the Federal Reserve's fight against inflation. If inflation remains elevated while the labor market stays strong, policymakers may feel less urgency to lower interest rates. That's because consumers with jobs continue spending money, which can keep demand elevated and make inflation harder to control. On the other hand, signs of labor market weakness could increase expectations for future easing measures. This balancing act is exactly why investors watch employment reports so closely. Every number matters. Every revision matters. Every surprise matters. For XRP and the broader crypto market, shifts in interest rate expectations can influence investor behavior significantly. That's why so many traders are focused not just on crypto news, but also on economic developments occurring far outside the digital asset industry. Another factor worth discussing is the unusual economic environment that has developed over the past several years. Many analysts argue that the enormous amount of liquidity introduced into the global financial system during previous stimulus periods continues to influence markets today. Inflation concerns have remained stubborn at times, while growth expectations have fluctuated. Add rising energy prices and geopolitical uncertainty into the mix, and you end up with a very complex environment for policymakers. Investors are trying to figure out which force will ultimately dominate. Will inflation concerns keep interest rates elevated for longer? Will economic weakness force policymakers to become more supportive? Or will markets continue navigating a middle ground where uncertainty remains high? These are the questions influencing decisions across stocks, bonds, commodities, and cryptocurrencies. XRP is part of that broader picture, which is why understanding macroeconomic developments remains incredibly important. Many analysts have also been debating where we are in the larger crypto cycle. Some believe the market still has significant upside ahead, while others argue that a longer period of consolidation may be necessary before the next major expansion phase begins. Predictions vary dramatically depending on who you ask. Some analysts have made bold forecasts in the past that eventually proved accurate, while others have completely missed the mark. The reality is that nobody knows the future with certainty. Markets have a way of surprising even the most experienced participants. What matters most is understanding probabilities rather than chasing certainty. XRP investors should remember that successful investing often involves managing expectations and preparing for multiple scenarios rather than becoming emotionally attached to a single outcome. Flexibility is one of the most valuable assets an investor can possess, especially during periods of heightened uncertainty like the one we're experiencing now. At the same time, there are several potential catalysts that continue attracting attention from the crypto community. Regulatory developments remain one of the biggest themes. Investors are closely monitoring legislative efforts that could provide greater clarity for the digital asset industry. Regulatory uncertainty has long been one of the largest obstacles facing broader adoption. Clear rules could potentially encourage greater institutional participation and reduce hesitation among businesses considering blockchain-related initiatives. That's why discussions surrounding crypto legislation continue generating excitement across the market. While nobody can guarantee the outcome, many investors believe that increased regulatory clarity could serve as an important long-term catalyst. The market is constantly attempting to price in future developments before they actually occur, which often creates anticipation-driven rallies and periods of heightened speculation. This brings us back to XRP specifically. Many supporters argue that XRP remains one of the most closely watched assets in the cryptocurrency sector because of its unique position within ongoing regulatory discussions and its potential role in cross-border payments. Whether you agree with every bullish argument or not, there is no denying that XRP commands a passionate community and significant investor interest. Whenever major developments occur, XRP tends to find itself at the center of the conversation. That attention can amplify both positive and negative reactions. If favorable news emerges, momentum can build quickly. If disappointing news arrives, volatility can increase just as rapidly. This dynamic is one reason why XRP often experiences strong emotional swings among investors. Understanding that reality is important because emotional reactions frequently drive short-term price movements more than fundamentals alone. Looking ahead, one scenario many investors are considering involves a buildup of optimism as key regulatory deadlines approach. Markets frequently move ahead of anticipated events. Traders often buy expectations rather than waiting for confirmation. This phenomenon is commonly referred to as buying the rumor. The challenge is that once the anticipated event actually arrives, markets sometimes reverse direction regardless of whether the news is positive. That's because expectations become fully priced in. However, there are also situations where strong news exceeds expectations and triggers further gains. The outcome depends largely on positioning, sentiment, and the details of the announcement itself. For XRP holders, understanding these possibilities is essential because price action can become highly unpredictable around major events. Managing risk becomes just as important as identifying opportunities. Another possibility involves a rotation of capital between different asset classes. If traditional markets experience increased volatility or profit-taking, some investors may look elsewhere for opportunities. Cryptocurrencies could potentially benefit from such a shift under the right conditions. This isn't guaranteed, but it's a scenario that many market participants continue monitoring. Investors constantly search for assets they believe are undervalued relative to their future potential. Whenever a compelling narrative emerges, capital can move surprisingly quickly. XRP supporters believe several potential catalysts could contribute to such a narrative. Whether those catalysts ultimately materialize remains to be seen, but the possibility is enough to keep many investors engaged and attentive. Markets are forward-looking mechanisms, and expectations often influence behavior long before actual outcomes become known. What makes the current situation especially fascinating is that multiple narratives are colliding simultaneously. We have geopolitical uncertainty, economic data, interest rate expectations, regulatory developments, and crypto-specific catalysts all competing for investor attention. Rarely do markets receive such a concentrated mix of potentially market-moving events within such a short period. This creates an environment where volatility can increase unexpectedly. It also creates opportunities for those who remain informed and disciplined. Emotional decision-making becomes particularly dangerous during periods like this because headlines can change rapidly. Investors who focus solely on one piece of information risk missing the broader picture. That's why it's important to step back and evaluate all the factors influencing the market rather than becoming fixated on a single narrative. As we move through the next 24 hours and beyond, every major update will matter. Investors will be watching geopolitical developments closely. They will be monitoring economic reports. They will be analyzing statements from policymakers and evaluating the progress of crypto-related legislation. Each piece of information has the potential to alter expectations and influence market behavior. For XRP holders, this means staying informed while avoiding panic. Volatility is a normal part of investing, especially in cryptocurrencies. Short-term price movements often create emotional reactions, but long-term outcomes are typically determined by broader trends and fundamental developments. Understanding that distinction can help investors maintain perspective during uncertain times. The coming days may be eventful, but patience and discipline remain critical components of any successful investment approach. One thing that continues to stand out is the level of attention XRP is receiving despite all the uncertainty. Markets usually ignore assets that investors have completely written off. The fact that XRP continues generating discussion, analysis, and speculation suggests that many participants still see significant potential ahead. Whether that potential is fully realized remains unknown, but interest remains strong. Institutional developments, regulatory conversations, and broader adoption themes continue fueling debate across the crypto community. As a result, XRP remains one of the most closely monitored digital assets in the market. That visibility can create opportunities, but it can also create heightened expectations. Investors should remember that markets rarely move in straight lines. Progress often comes with periods of frustration, consolidation, and volatility along the way. So as we wrap things up, the key takeaway is simple. The next few hours and days could be extremely important for XRP and the broader crypto market. We have major geopolitical developments unfolding, critical economic reports approaching, and significant regulatory discussions continuing in the background. Any one of these factors could influence market sentiment. Combined together, they create a potentially explosive environment for volatility and opportunity. As always, stay informed, do your own research, and avoid making emotional decisions based solely on short-term headlines. Thank you for spending part of your day with me here on the Crypto Intellect. If you enjoyed this update, make sure you support the channel and share your thoughts below. I want to hear what you think happens next for XRP. Until next time, stay safe, stay smart, and let's make a lot of money.